Hello, I'm Mike Buchanan, leader of the political party Justice for Men and Boys. Since I launched the party almost 10 years ago, it's been the only one in the English-speaking world campaigning for the human rights of men and boys on many fronts. In the video description, there's a link to our background document for this interview, with information on rape and sexual offences, drawn mainly from our General Election Manifesto and an important book, William Collins's The Empathy Gap, Male Disadvantages and the Mechanisms of Their Neglect. The book has 63 ratings across Amazon's British and American sites, all 5-starred, and the ebook edition costs under £5. In the paperback edition, rape and sexual assault are explored in 72 pages, domestic abuse and violence in 35 pages. The book debunks many feminist myths and lies about rape and sexual offences, including the lie that false rape allegations are rare. Using just 2 official statistics, Collins estimates that 77% of rape allegations made to the police are false. Far from living in a rape culture, we clearly live in a false rape allegation culture, which destroys innocent men's lives and all too often leads to their suicides. The public naming of men for alleged sexual offences, sometimes even before charges are made, is an egregious human rights violation. We've always called for the anonymity of suspected sexual offenders until and unless they've been convicted. Collins writes at length about the miscarriages of justice which inevitably lead to the convictions of innocent men. It is my firm conviction that there are thousands of men in British prisons today wrongly convicted for rape and other sexual offences, and that this has been the case for many years. One of them is Sean B.W. Parker, who I'll be interviewing today. In the background document, we've included the guidance provided by the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, in relation to the Sexual Offences Act 2003. It covers the issue of consent generally and the issue of intoxication specifically, which is the central issue in Sean's case. The guidance references a case in 2007 stating that issues of consent and capacity to consent to intercourse in cases of alleged rape should normally be left to the jury to determine. This is why feminists have long campaigned for the removal of juries from rape trials. The CPS has long played a central role in the feminist war on men. It did so when Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions, the organisation's leader, over 2008 to 13. He became the leader of the Labour Party in 2019 and will probably be the country's Prime Minister after the next general election. Under the leadership of Starmer's successor, the feminist Alison Saunders, the war against men intensified. My guest today was one of the last people to be charged under the Saunders regime. In 2015, she was accused by journalist Julia Hartley-Brewer of a crusade to criminalise drunken sexual encounters. In 2017, Daily Telegraph journalist Alison Pearson called for Saunders to resign following the scandal of several high-profile rape cases falling apart or convictions being overturned due to police withholding key information regarding the innocence of the accused. She resigned a few months later. Things have not improved under the leadership of her successor, Max Hill, a man. In a press release sent out 5 months ago, which we linked to in a blog piece recently, the CPS boasted that it was collaborating with police to help strengthen prosecution cases in rape trials, whilst having no interest in strengthening defence cases. It's time for me to introduce my guest. Sean B.W. Parker has written 7 books and recorded 6 music albums. He's a lecturer in art, cultural theory, and justice reform. He lived in Istanbul for 10 years until 2014, where he lectured at Istanbul University and gave a TEDx talk on stammering and creativity. He's contributed to a number of books, won 6 Koestler Arts Awards, including a Platinum Award for his play The Wolfstadt Wire, and a Perry Lectures Essay Award in 2019. He's the editor of False Allegations Watch for the Empower the Innocent organisation, which is affiliated with the University of Bristol Innocence Project. In 2018, Sean was convicted of a Category 2 sexual offence, characterised in court as friend rape, at the height of the Me Too movement in the UK. He was sentenced to a prison term of 8.5 years and, in line with convention, released after 4.5 years. He spent the first 2.5 years at Dartmoor, the UK's oldest and most remote prison, where he worked as a founding editor of the prison magazine and as a Samaritan's listener. He's now the editor of False Allegations Watch, a division of Michael Norton's Empowering the Innocent project, and continues to write on art, culture, and justice reform. Sean, welcome, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You came to my attention in 2018 when you wrote to me from Dartmoor Prison. It seemed clear to me at the time, and it still does, that your conviction was a miscarriage of justice. There's a link in the video description to your personal account of your encounter with a woman, which led to your arrest for rape, your subsequent conviction, and more. For our viewers, would you like to give an account of your prior relationship with a woman, the fateful night, if I can call it that, and the immediate aftermath?
Yeah. Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me on, and really respect the Justice for Men and Boys Party for years now. Fantastic. Yeah. Get to your question, to get to the subject. I was arrested in end of 2016 and put on trial at the beginning of 2018. So it's a 14-month gap there, firstly. During 2016, I was running a arts centre on the south coast of England. It's a venue art centre, and I loved it. I'm still very proud of it. And we put on lots of acts and things like that. As you know, I'm actually an arts guy first, and a convicted kind of for maintaining innocence second, is how I see myself. During the year 2016, which was the time that we were open for generally, I struck up a friendship with a local kind of artisan person who became a good friend. We were chatting every night online, and I bought a stool from her for £400, I think it was, and some other artifacts over the year to help her business, and she was helping ours. And she's quite energetic too, as I am, entrepreneur-wise. The place sold alcohol, and alcohol's available, and I used to drink, and I had done for all my life before that too, until 2016. And probably, did we drink too much? Yes, we probably did, as did all the staff at the venue, directors, managers, everybody. And but I suppose I was carrying the can culturally, not by license actually, but by reputation, because I was a public face doing the PR. Come to Christmas of that year, of 2016, we had a long kind of night of her networking event at the venue. We did the networking event. It was a long night. We started to drink at 6 p.m. and into the evening. Everybody went home at about midnight. We continued to drink. I was providing it from the bar, which I was stocking, and we had our tabs, so we would use all that. And if you get to 5 a.m., that means kind of 11 hours drinking together, which is multiple Bacardis and Cokes and multiple glasses of wine for me, that kind of thing. We drunk, and people get drunk, and that's what they do. And it was Christmas time too, so that's interesting. What was that, 6 years ago? So 5 a.m, we went up to my bedroom at the venue, to the top floor, and had consensual sex as far as I was concerned. And she stayed the night, and the next morning we were both feeling, have we pushed a friendship too far? Which is what often happens. What has happened a million times a night across the country of a weekend in Britain. And all those things kind of came up later on, obviously, but felt strange, but not guilty, in the sense of criminally guilty. So she went home. She sent some jokey texts that day, and it was all fine. And I went back to bed with a hangover and let the hangover clear. But by the evening, 5 p.m., the storm clouds came when her parents came to the venue. Kind of came in the front door, which was open. I do acknowledge the door wasn't locked, so they didn't actually break in, but they just stormed up the stairs, and basically attacked me. They didn't punch me, but they attacked me with a chair and with various threats. It was very unpleasant. My housemate saw that and asked them to leave and took notes. And I thought, oh dear, something's changed this afternoon, hasn't it? It transpired, excuse my stammer, transpired that that complainant had told her boyfriend that afternoon about what had happened, and I think her parents at the same time. They'd decided, well, that's rape then, you were drunk. And the police came around that evening at 6 p.m, up the stairs, clomp, clomp, clomp. And I'm like, well, this is clearly not very good. And they said,
Sean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
sorry,
just before we come on to the arrest, I wonder if you could just say a few words about, just going back to your housemate, because your housemate, I'm not quite sure how to put this, told you that he'd heard the two of you in your room, and it was clearly consensual. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that roughly right?
kind of, yeah, approximately. There was sort of two housemates at home that night, and the co-director in another room, and another older gentleman. It was a full house that night, because that's what the venue was doing. We were a B&B as well as a venue. The housemate below me just said, after the assault the next day, he said, oh, I just heard some giggling and moaning last night. But nobody else in the house heard anything, because we were trying to be quiet. We were drunk, it was very late, and it was time to go to bed. We were being quiet. So yes, there wasn't anything heard in the classic sense of these allegations. No, if that's your question.
Yes, no, it did. It answers it well. I mean, I think in the real world, as opposed to the the world as imagined by feminist lawyers, for example, a man would take a woman giggling as an indication of consent, especially if he himself was drunk. But okay, thank you for that, Sean.
Welcome.
So, Sean, can we turn now to your arrest and conviction and the time you spent in prison?
Yes, sure. So on the evening of the day afterwards, of the index conviction, the police kind of came up the stairs at 6 p.m. and banged on the door and said, we're arresting you on suspicion of rape. And I'm like, as anybody would be in that state, right, okay. But my kind of co-director was behind me saying, it'll be fine. And I'm like, I think I know what's going on here, don't worry. So off we went to the police station, and I'm a very amenable guy. And so I was amenable there. They did what police do. They took all their fingerprints and jeans, that kind of thing, fingernails. So obviously a very alarming situation. But one is aware of all the things, because I was in the media anyway, as a promoter person, you're aware of in the media there's a consent push at that time, sort of late 2016, under Alison Saunders or whomever was responsible for this in the media, in the government. And consent push, the person on the South Coast who, full disclosure, the place was under a lot of scrutiny by the council because of our carelessness with the licensing rules. The venue would serve alcohol without food from time to time, and a couple of times the licensing officers coming in at 11 o'clock every Friday night. Rather too much scrutiny. We thought we had a court case about that. They took the license away because of this a week before my arrest. It wasn't my license, it was my co-director's, but off it went. So we were already under a lot of scrutiny in the press all the time. And so then I'm in the press for this. right next to Christmas. It's almost very, very useful for them at a time when Mr. Weinstein is being, the stuff with Me Too is happening in the media all over the place. So what do they have here on the South Coast? They have their own little Weinstein in a venue there to, as far as they're concerned, obviously, as far as I'm concerned. So that was the process there at the police station. They said, "Oh, Mr. Parker's very, very amenable. Don't worry." So it was all not chatty, not banter, nothing like that. Just very quiet, calm. Let's get over this sort of thing. And so the next day, it was a night in the cells, a lot of reflection, still getting over that hangover from the night before. And the next day, let out, go home. And then there's some peace for a good period of time. But obviously, gone. What the hell's gone on here? Everyone kind of almost everyone's on my side there in the venue and looking at it and saying, because of what the housemate sort of said upstairs, I mean, there wasn't anything heard. There was lots of alcohol, blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the consent laws being what they had become, it all became much more hairy, obviously. And what they then did, which was to make the case much more appealing to the Crown Prosecution Service and to Alison Saunders, was to bundle this together with a complaint that happened 6 months before this index event in the summer of 2016, where a ex-employee of the venue had complained about, for my kissing off his girlfriend, but what we saw on the CCTV was her kissing me, where it was very consensual in the venue. It was given a no further action at the time. They just dismissed it. But then because of this next one, they put them together, which is an modus operandi of Alison Saunders, by all accounts, to put two things of massively different importance, a kiss given a no further action, and then alleged rape, which is a one-night stand, banging those together, to joindering them, they call it, to create a case. And so a year later, or 6 months later, I was at the police station with my mum, and she's going, "Well, this is all very strange, isn't it, darling?" I'm like, "Yes, it is, Mum. It's all very strange indeed." And the policeman who had to charge us said, "We're very sorry about this, but the CPS are going to charge." And I just couldn't believe it. Obviously, that's when it becomes, what? All of my friends are like, "What?" And everybody was. And then, if you want me to continue, 6 months later, 6 months later into the beginning of 2018. So that's the whole of the timeline to May, end of to 2018. And Harvey Weinstein is being charged in New York. Of course, we've got an eye on that fellow. And in the week he's being charged, I'm on trial in the Crown Court and thinking, this isn't good. This is where the other element of things comes in, which might be of interest to your viewers, in that I'm not going to bin the legal team here. It was a legal aid situation. I'm not going to be too unkind, but at one point when the housemate said he wasn't, we had to drag him to court to talk about the laughing and giggling thing, but he became a hostile witness in the 14 months whilst I'm out of town. So when that happened, that's the one witness gone. So why he changed his mind, no one knows. People think that could be from being pressured, from being any kind of reason. But he changed his mind, and as soon as he did, the barrister turned to me and said, "Perhaps you shouldn't talk, Mr. Parker. Your stammer could be seen as a sign of guilt." And I didn't want to speak because of my stammer, because of the whole stress of the whole thing. Who wants to speak in court? I said, "Right, okay, you know something I don't. I'm not going to speak." Fantastic. He said, "Well, just sign this." So I signed it to say I understand the possibilities, because I didn't want to speak. But as we've seen subsequently, it was a fatal decision. Not that everything would have been okay if I had spoken. I recognise that. But because I didn't, I really signed my own, warrant, didn't I? Everybody said that, and I recognise that. It was stupid not to speak. And I encourage anybody else so at the moment, I don't have an impediment of a stammer. It's a bit of a stammer. But then, for 5 years ago, at the end of all this stress, I was barely speaking, and couldn't, So I didn't speak. The jury's looking at me, that guy over there in the dock, the accused, and so they couldn't see this part of me. They just saw a bloke sitting over there. On the fourth day of that trial, then, after a bunch of witnesses on their part, or people who were talking about the venue, basically, witnesses, there weren't any, and I didn't have anybody there. And the CCTV of the supporting thing, they obviously ignored. and they came to the conclusion that I was guilty, and I was passed a sentence of 8.5 years.
And I mean, it's difficult to know quite what the bearing is on that, on the jury's decision, I guess, Sean. But it was a jury of 9 women and 3 men. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Sean, I'd like to turn more generally to the issue of consent in rape cases. It's one thing for men to be held responsible for their own actions and inactions, but why should they also be held responsible for the actions and inactions of women, or of others, including women? And why should women be held unaccountable for their actions and inactions? Now, this isn't victim blaming, which I know is an accusation that's going to be hurled at me for this interview, but it's saying to women that they need to be adults and take personal responsibility for themselves, that actions have consequences, including drinking, and they should take sensible precautions to ensure their personal safety in the way, I mean, just in the way that men know they have to, or at least should. Any thoughts on this issue of, I guess, well, MRAs would tend to call it moral agency, and the lack of moral agency that we attribute to women?
Yeah, good question. It's the infantilization of women, isn't it? And which is obviously a thing that I've become much more acute to over the last couple of years. I mean, I'm not a political guy in the sense of I don't have a party, except possibly the Justice from anyway. But I don't have a party, and I'm not an MRA person, not a men's rights person. I'm an equal rights person, and under equal rights, you would think that people have the same agency as those people say in their decisions, but that's not being applied by the court. And the result of that is every year to 70,000 rape allegations across the country, and you don't get these people talking in the way that I do. And 68,000 or so of them go nowhere, which by definition makes them spurious, if not false. But if you mention this, you're called victim blaming, all the rest of it, because of the tone of the debate.
Yes, William. Sorry, Sean. Yes, no. William Collins talks at length about the reasons for the attrition in rape cases. You know, from the initial reports to the police to convictions, and it's actually no higher a rate of attrition than is true in abuse cases, in assault cases, more generally. But I mean, to my mind, if you know, if a man and a woman are equally drunk, the you know, and have sex, the man is no more guilty, you know, of abusing the woman than the woman of abusing the man, quite frankly. And in case, you know, and you know, if drunkenness is to be the guide, then you know, there's plenty of cases where, you know, a drunk woman, sorry, where sex takes place, where a woman's had less to drink, was less drunk than a man, and so rationally she should be the one in the dock. But men just do not see themselves in that light, and we know there's plenty of there's plenty of sexual abuse of men by women. It's something that we cover at great length in our manifesto. But men will tend to sort of handle it and move on. But of course, there's a huge industry encouraging women to not move on and be resilient. But that's for another day. I don't know how often sex takes place after the intake of alcohol, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was in the majority of cases, certainly in the UK. Because we are quite a boozy culture, although you and I, for some time, have not been drinkers. So, are we really to believe, therefore, that you know that most examples of sex are rape, which of course is the radical feminist position, especially the lesbian radical feminists? It's exactly what they believe. Any thoughts on that?
If you're talking about the alcohol, you mean? Or
Yes.
yeah, alcohol is a part of British culture. It's a part of North European culture, and it's very valuable. And I'm not entirely abstinent. I haven't been required to be. I just chosen to be, because the older you get, the bad experiences can tend to outweigh the good ones, is the only observation I have on it. And it's damned expensive, of course. So I support people getting drunk. People should drink. British people should drink. It's a good thing. It's a personal choice. To the question itself, to the implication itself, is that 8 to 9 out of 10 of all these allegations are by people you know. So these aren't strangers. Mr. Wayne Couzens and of the terrible Sarah Everard thing. There's not a man in the country, except for a tiny amount of nutcases, who have any sympathy for Wayne Couzens. It was a dreadful act, and his mental health is of more interest than anything people can do with it. What's going on there. But it was a dreadful thing. So let's, just in terms of your audience, let me put that across. And that kind of example is nothing to do with the 67,000 other cases which have gone on, which are sexual misadventures, sexual misunderstandings. And I worked out this term early in Dartmoor when I was first kind of writing to the Justice for Men and Boys. This is sexual misadventure. People would mock that because they're, especially people who are in authority, and sexual misconduct. Well, the fact is that's what it is. So charge it as that, or do with whatever you will with that, which would be conflict resolution. No, before if there's a problem, before you call the police, call the conflict resolution, specially trained rape courts, whatever they want to call it, because it's not that. It's an argument. It's a source of shame. That's the reason that I was binned, because there was a love bite there. And what does one do with a love bite? Well, let's create a story. All these things are a part of a possible appeal, so I don't go into them too deeply. But loads of the people who are watching this, I presume, will know the complexity and the nuance of the things unsaid and said in a romantic situation tryst, whether that's very clear, whether it's romantic or not. The word consent, who in your life or anybody else's life goes, shall we? And say, yes, let's. It's very, very unusual that sex happens in those conditions. If that's how they want it to be, well, they'll be sending the reproduction stats even further down than they are already. Do you know what I mean?
Indeed. Well, I mean, I've always thought that to lesbian radical feminists, I mean, I suppose Julie Bindel would be an obvious example. The mere notion of heterosexual sex just horrifies them. They find it grotesque. And hence all intercourse is rape. I mean, they do see it in political terms, which is the most incredible dehumanizing way to look at it. But I mean, if we leave alcohol out of the issue, I mean, we know from statistics from the Office for National Statistics that there's so much there, but one of the things we know is that women are more likely to be abused, considerably more likely to be abused by a female partner than by a male partner, and that when it comes to sexual offences, sexual abuse, women report it in equal numbers in lesbian relationships as in straight relationships. So the entire feminist narrative around all this is absolutely ridiculous. But of course, it's enshrined in they are everywhere in the justice system, in the lawmaking system. The Social Offences Act, sorry, the Sexual Offences Act. You can see feminist influence running all the way through that. But we'll move on. Sean, following the televised court case with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, do you think public support for the believe the victims narrative has declined?
I do. And I think that it's a positive thing that it was on camera. There's a cultural fact that we import things out of America to the UK because they're hot and they're easy to weaponize, and the feminist things, that toxic feminism as opposed to other kinds of feminism. Though I advise everyone to watch
I think I'd say as I'm duty bound as an MRA, Sean, to say every form is toxic. But please carry on.
Okay, I will bow to other. Yeah, it, quite. These things can be used by the courts, and if you put enough people who have an identitarian agenda, is what I put it, because I would expand the whole thing far beyond the feminism to other areas of culture on which I write, But I try to write about them as balanced as I possibly, despite what I've been through. Despite what I've been through, I don't like all that stuff. I don't like the emotioneering, and the problem is that men generally don't like emotioneering. They like to sort out their problems themselves or between one or another, as opposed to feel my pain. And I think what they spotted with Ms. Heard, who is not as good an actor as Johnny Depp, or as old an actor, or as long-term an actor, is that they spotted as someone who's attempting to weaponize their entitlement. So for years, it's like, how dare you? I'm a beautiful blonde, and how dare our relationship go like this? Give me 30 million quid. And Mr. Depp has said, sorry, it wasn't anything like that. And you didn't actually talk about me in that article by name, but we know what you meant. So he stood up and he said, no, this is unacceptable, despite his own habits. And I'm not going to support him. I love him as an actor, like lots of Depp supporters. I think he's fab. And the rock and roll stuff that he seems to be enjoyed too much, I'd like to say, well, there's no need to do that, But it's an identity that he wants to. But if he did bring that into the relationship, it's a pity. It's not you're evil, and there's lots of the Depp supporters say Amber's evil and all that stuff. I don't go there because I'm 47. It's like, it's not about being evil. It's about something's gone wrong here, but she shouldn't be able to weaponize that for compensation. And the American courts seem to agree with that. The English court, of course, didn't under the Sun thing, and that was a pretty bizarre situation. So it embarrassed the English court system rather, making people go.
I mean, that was a very clear miscarriage of justice too. I think we now all know. Sean, our Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, likes to be seen as a no-nonsense minister. Yet, despite his law degree and having worked for one of the top legal firms in the country, Raab fills all his press releases with the legally incorrect term victim rather than alleged victims. Would you like to say something on how politicians and others manipulate language to further their objectives?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that concerns me the most about the whole of the process, and stretching out into all these forms of identitarianism, culture wars, is the twisting of language. Mr. Raab is he had an idea of himself, which is quite. He thinks he's a moral guy, and I have no reason to think that he's not. And so let's not worry about the red and blue of these things, because they're all so mixed up. It doesn't matter with that. He thinks that he's doing the right thing. And in the past, he said affirmative action is wrong. And I agree with him. Lots of, I like a meritocracy of there is no equality of outcomes. You, the best person for the job, black, white, male, female, and equal rights, proper equal rights based on that. And he appears to agree with that. And with the other hand, there's the victim industry, which is, you must put it in every press release, victim, 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 victim. Well, there aren't any. Not of a person anyway. If a thing hasn't got to verdict, there is no victim. There's a complainant, and that's it. And there isn't an offender, there's a defendant. So they need to get the language back to Enlightenment principles, if nothing else, if not the actual language itself. But what they're doing under the RADFEM identitarianism push, including Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, all of these things on the ultra left woke. I'm a centrist, but I used to be a little bit on the left, as you know. Now I'm a centrist, but they're making me feel like some kind of a fascist, and I'm like, far from it. I just believe in sense. Common sense is overused, but I believe in at least sense. Something that we can agree on, having agreed terms. But they've been the agreed terms, and now even Dominic Raab thinks he has to bang out the victim term, like all the victims commissioners. I just did an article on the ex-victims commissioner a couple of weeks ago, pointing out the entire bias in their thing against men. And they know that, but they're hoping it's not seen. And just to bring it right up to date, the Operation SETOERIA, Soteria, this company, Soteria Solutions, is comes out of the US, as was brilliantly reported on by Claire Best, the journalist. And they are coming into academia in Britain. They've been doing this for a while, but now they're working with the Crown Prosecution Service, basically to get the statistics of rape up from the place they are now, which they consider to be too low. But as we've seen, they're spurious or false. They're trying to get those up. So you can have many, many more victims of miscarriages of justice coming through, because a commercialized company have been imported from the America, with people earning grants and grants and grants off pushing the victim narrative. It's unhealthy for women in infantilization of them. It's unhealthy for men in terms of outcomes and destroying lives through allegations. And it's unhealthy for the entire culture, because it's just saying, got a problem, we're going to make it bigger, and that's how the industry keeps going on, and it's just unsustainable.
Well, it is, of course, it's I mean, the beneficiaries of this god-awful situation is, of course, the women working in the rape industry. It's I mean, these otherwise unemployable women and academics, difficult to know what to say about them, really. Sean, a quarter of young Americans know either a false accuser or someone falsely accused of a sexual offence. And we know that nearly 1,400 people are believed to have been wrongfully convicted. That's across all crimes in the UK every year, according to an estimate by the Crown Prosecution Service, as reported by the BBC. Why do you think these figures have exploded since 2010?
According to Claire Best again, or the research I've got from her, is that it's all in the wake of the Title IX IX, as they put it in America, thing of the campus rape fear at the beginning of the 2010s. So it's useful to use the 2010 as a number because of its sort of symmetry of decades. Joe Biden, not talking about him sort of politically, and I respect him as a stammerer, person who stammers, but Joe Biden signed this anti-men doctrine to say that if to handle the campus rape hassle in the media, that the boards of academies were allowed to treat them as if they were the police, and if they did so, they would get more grants. So to get the more grants into your university, their businesses, they would do more allegations. So the number of allegations go up at the same time as the amount of money. That was happening rampantly in America between 2011 and 2015. And then they imported it over to the UK again with the academicians and the criminologists and the female advocates of all kinds, the media pundits. You hear those American voices on TV, you're like, what's their game? Well, it might be connected to this, possibly, and it's a business imported. So the more allegations you get, the more money you get. And then the whole of the victims industry melting into the justice reform industry. This isn't conspiracy theory. These are all very provable facts under various reports. It's just very intricately done, much like a web. And so then you start to realize, well, what's just happened to me? What's just happened to him? Like in prison, 1,400 a year, up to 1,500, between 13 and 1,500 wrongful convictions. But the reason they're wrongful is because of the grey area of the alleged sort of sex offences. You can do anything with it, and that's what the soteria is going to do more. I don't think it's been doing it so far. It's going to get worse is the main problem. That's why interviews like this are so important. Okay, I was done under Me Too. People will me under Operation Midland, back to the 2003 thing with Tony Blair and the New Labour's expanding of the sex laws to having a new law for every day that New Labour are in office. Thousands of new laws under Mr. Blair and arguably his wife and Blunkett, who's apologised many times for the IPP sentence, all other theories under justice reform. But now we're having an American commercial company imported to Britain to up the statistics in order for everyone else to make more money. So even if the toxic feminists argument, we want to go, well, they're just feminists, that's just the culture wars, possibly, but there's still a bunch of other people who don't identify as feminists making a bunch of money off it. So the whole of the culture is implicated in the further victimization of insufficiently risk-averse males.
No, I couldn't agree more. The lawyers just make a fortune out of this misery, as they do, of course, in the family courts, depriving mainly fathers of seeing their children and driving up the male suicide statistics. Sean, oh, just a final thought, perhaps. I mean, the Crown Prosecution Service is supposed to be apolitical, but it boasts in its press releases about working with the police to try and increase the conviction rate for rape. It is absolutely scandalous. And frankly, I think Max Hill should resign, as did Saunders. But Sean, I know you're appealing your conviction, and I wish you every success with that. And I know you can't talk about the details of it for obvious reasons. But I'd like to thank you for your courage in standing up for what you feel is right. Hopefully, the viewers will agree with me that your conviction was very clearly a wrongful one. Thank you for your courage in doing this interview, and I wish you well, and I hope we can stay in touch.
Thank you so much for all the great work that you do too, and for having me on. It's a real honor. Thank you so much, Mike.
It's a pleasure. And it's a wrap. Great. Thank you, Sean.